Edward Scissorhands, Tim Burton's ultimate masterpiece, the fairy tale-esque classic about a unique young man played by Johnny Depp, whom has, well, scissors for hands, of course. Released in 1990 at the time when Tim Burton and Johnny Depp team-ups felt new and fresh and exciting. Edward Scissorhands tells the story of Edward, a kind, gentle soul who literally has a cookie for a heart, whom was created by a kind inventor in a big castle. But sadly, the inventor died before Edward could be completed, hence his scissor hands. One day, Edward gets discovered in his castle by local Avon lady Peg Boggs, whom decides to take him to her home and help him integrate with society, where Edward wows the locals with his unique creativity and playful innocence. However, things start to get complicated as Edward starts to get feelings for Peg's teenage daughter, Kim, played by Winona Ryder. And the townspeople start to turn on Edward as he becomes the victim of negative gossip and social outcasting, where Edward wonders if maybe he just doesn't belong among the complexities and dog-eat-dog corruption of society. So today we are going to explore my favourite Tim Burton movie, Edward Scissorhands, the sad tale of someone different trying to fit into society. The film has amazing visuals and a simplistic yet deep, meaningful story. So let's get on with it and look into 10 things that you may not know about Edward Scissorhands. Number 10. It was originally going to be a musical. Tim Burton is no stranger to dark gothic musicals, as he has now released several dark tales with musical numbers, including The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Corpse Bride, and Sweeney Todd. However, in the early days of Edward Scissorhands, that too was intended to be a musical. But along the way, Burton decided to make it a contemporary film instead. However, if you feel saddened by the fact that you never got to see Edward Scissorhands in singing format, you're in luck, as the movie was actually converted into a musical. Well, technically it's a dance show that came out in 2005 and received mixed reviews. Okay, well maybe people didn't want to see a musical version of Edward Scissorhands after all. Number 9. Edward has very few lines in the movie. Well, they say that silence is golden, and I do think that is most definitely the case with Edward Scissorhands. On the account that in the entire movie, Edward only has a total of 169 lines. Yep, just a measly 169. But that's okay, as I feel a lot of what Edward is thinking and feeling is projected onto his facial expressions and body language, and thus demonstrates his innocence even more, so kudos to Johnny Depp for pulling that off perfectly.
Goodbye.
Also, I can't help but feel like the character just wouldn't have worked out as much if he was more talkative, as it probably would have saved Edward from some of the unfortunate mishaps he endures. Number 8. Attack of the Bugs. Edward Scissorhands was filmed on location in Florida under scorching hot weather, and because of this there were often swarms of bugs flying around all over the damn place. In fact, at times, the plague of bugs flying around would be so severe that production would often just come to a stop. So yeah, this classic Tim Burton movie that we all know and love was nearly defeated by bugs. Yeah, bugs. But to be fair though, the bugs never make it in the final product, so at least they were able to film the movie without any visible bug infestations. Thank God too. Otherwise, when we watch Edward Scissorhands, we won't be saying, "Oh my god, look, that guy has scissors for hands," But instead we'll be saying, oh my god, just look at all those bugs all over the damn place. Number 7, it was the last film to star Vincent Price. Vincent Price was a veteran of the horror genre, in a career lasting decades, and Tim Burton was a huge fan of Price. So much so that the role of the inventor in Edward Scissorhands was written specifically for Price. However, the role of the inventor was much bigger than what we actually saw in the film, and he was meant to have more screen time. But sadly, Price's involvement in the film had to be limited down due to bad health. And sadly, Price just passed away 3 years after making Edward Scissorhands, making it the film to end his career, as it was the final film he starred in. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the fact that Vincent Price is so fragile and weak in Edward Scissorhands somehow makes him more sympathetic, and just like Edward, it makes him more innocent. Either way, at least Price got in that one last performance, even if it was short. Number 6. Edward was a reflection of Tim Burton's isolation. So where exactly did the idea of Edward Scissorhands come from? Well, the genesis of the character goes back to Tim Burton's teenage years, as Burton grew up in suburban Burbank and felt terribly isolated during this time of his life, and like he didn't fit in. So one day he reflected that sadness into an illustration, where he drew a sad, thin man with blades for fingers, and thus Edward Scissorhands was born. Burton claimed that he struggled to communicate with people and had difficulties in maintaining friendships. So in reality, Edward Scissorhands is Tim Burton, be that a manifestation of his feelings of social emptiness. And it was while he was working on Beetlejuice that he approached novelist Caroline Thompson to write a screenplay for his Edward Scissorhands idea. Thompson would go on to say that because Edward Scissorhands was so personal to Burton, her script was a love poem to the director. Number 5. Edward's hairstyle is based on Robert Smith's hairdo. Yep, I guess if you want your socially isolated character to look strange and unique, who else better than to turn to than The Cure, as Edward's hairstyle is apparently based on The Cure band member Robert Smith, which is definitely without a doubt a strange and obscure haircut, and does give Edward that sort of extra individuality that makes him stand out in the movie. Speaking of Edward's looks, the construction of the suit is just as obscure as the character himself, as the suit is in part made up of Tim Burton's couch and is held together by black sticky tape, and in addition to that, Depp had to lose 29 pounds to fit into the tight-fitting suit, and not to mention of course the hours that would require for Depp to have his makeup applied. Yeah, wow, all this hard work just to get Edward's look right. Still, it totally paid off. Number 4, Edward's magical trees aren't so magical. Throughout the movie, we see trees that Edward has sculptured, turning them into amazing works of art. However, when you find out the process behind making these whimsical looking trees, they suddenly don't feel quite as whimsical, as the trees themselves were actually made out of chicken wire. Yep, plain old boring chicken wire. So the wire would be used as skeletal structures for the trees, and then to give them the grassy look, the wire models would then be covered in green plastic grass. So yeah, despite the fact that the trees in the movie look nothing short of truly stunning, they are actually made up of something really mundane as chicken wire. Number 3, Drew Barrymore auditioned for the movie. In the early 90s, Drew Barrymore had something of a bad girl image going on, and I'm guessing had she starred in Edward Scissorhands, that may have put a stop to that, as the young actress auditioned for the role of Edward Scissorhands' love interest Kim Boggs, but she lost to Winona Ryder. At the time, Winona Ryder was casted in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part 3, but Ryder dropped out of the project after the first day of shooting. There are some claims that she dropped out of The Godfather Part 3 to star in Edward Scissorhands because Johnny Depp insisted that she should do it, as the two were actually a couple at the time. And I guess from Tim Burton's point of view, it would have made sense casting Ryder, as he had previously worked with her 2 years earlier on Beetlejuice, where the two worked well together. So with that, Drew Barrymore was out and Winona Ryder was in. And thus, in 1990, Ryder made slow dancing under ice sculptures being crafted a thing. And in all honesty, I think the fact that Depp and Ryder were in a real-life relationship at the time totally pays off. And I think their chemistry and connection totally shows on the screen. They do look very, very sweet. Now, the less we say about the messy breakup, the better. Number 2. Actors considered for the role of Edward. As with most of the movies I explore in my countdowns, there are usually a long list of potential actors that could have been casted in the roles of some of our favourite characters. Thus, the characters could have been completely changed as we know them. And Edward Scissorhands is no exception, as many actors were considered for the role, including Gary Oldman, Jim Carrey, Tom Hanks, oh my god, just imagine that, and Robert Downey Jr. And even Michael Jackson. Yeah, Michael Jackson himself was at one stage considered for the role of Edward Scissorhands, which I can somehow oddly see happening. I don't know, is it just me, or does that kind of make sense? 20th Century Fox was really keen to get Tom Cruise in the role, and for a while Cruise was somewhat involved in the project, but he wanted to change things around and give the movie a happier ending. Something Burton refused to do, so Cruise was out the project. Johnny Depp really wanted the role, and had to convince Burton to give it to him. Thanks to 21 Jump Street, Depp was worried that he was going to have a teenage heartthrob image about him, and wanted to be taken seriously as an actor. So Burton, I guess, saw something unique in him, and thus Depp was cast in the role, and now it's hard to imagine anyone but Depp in the role. So, let me get this right. There actually was once a time when Burton wasn't too keen to cast Johnny Depp in one of his films. Wow, how the times have changed. And I also think it's worth mentioning that Crispin Glover auditioned for the role of local bully / Edward's nemesis, but lost to Anthony Michael Hall. Now that would have been weird. I just don't know if I would have believed Crispin Glover pushing Johnny Depp around. But then again, had Michael Hall not been cast, I probably would be saying I can't imagine the nerdy kid from Pretty in Pink pushing Depp around, so who knows? Number 1, the story is meant to be seen through Edward's eyes. Indeed, the movie is meant to be seen through the fresh-eyed perspective of Edward Scissorhands, which explains why the neighbourhood looks so bright and colourful and fantastical. It's demonstrating Edward's childlike demeanour and how he sees the world, and in addition to that, shows the beauty in how Edward sees day-to-day sceneries which may appear mundane to everyone else. This also explains why other visuals get drastically exaggerated, like why we would see Edward trimming small bushes, which then suddenly turns into ginormous tree sculptures. And even Edward's castle home looks totally unrealistic and like something out of a storybook. It also explains why when Edward goes to the bank, it looks like a big soulless building without any colours. This represents society's guidelines stepping into Edward's life and invading his innocent perspective and forcing him to conform within society by performing duties like opening an account and getting into the workforce.
You can't buy the necessities of life with cookies. You can't buy a car with cookies, am I right, Jim?
Oh, that's true, sir, you can't.
And so to me, this is the most fascinating aspect of the movie. To the common person, a bank looks just like a bank, and a neighbourhood looks just like a neighbourhood. But when Edward sees a neighbourhood, he sees an idyllic suburbia of the true paradise it is. And when he sees a bank, he sees it as a truly corrupted and terrifying featureless place that it is without any imagination. And in doing so, the movie kind of points out to us the flaws in society and the flaws within ourselves. Well guys, that was my list of things that you may not know about Edward Scissorhands. I hope you have all enjoyed it and that I may have opened your eyes to some alternative perspectives of the movie. I think we could all learn from this magical movie and all learn to be a bit more accepting of others and to not outcast people for their obscurity and individuality. and to not hold prejudices for their differences, but instead learn to love them for it. Anyway, I'm Minty, and seriously, how awesome is the music in Edward Scissorhands? That was a masterpiece, so yeah, good work Danny Elfman. See ya.